With the invention and development of microscopes, we have been able to see, observe, and study life in much more detail. And in a previous video, we saw how scientists determined that both plants and animals are all made up of cells. And upon further investigation, we noticed that animal and plant cells look different, not just in their shape, but also in the components that make them up, which we're going to call cell organelles, the parts inside of the cell. And that's what this video is on. We're going to take a closer look at the organelles that they share and also the ones that are unique to plants and unique to animal cells. So let's take a look at cell organelles. Okay, so there are organelles that are unique to plants and some that are unique to animals, but we're going to start with the majority of organelles, which are in both animal and plant cells. So I'm going to pop out of the way here so we can quickly list them, then we'll go in more detail. The first one is the nucleus, which is the middle kind of sphere in both of those diagrams. The endoplasmic reticulum, which is that kind of squiggly stuff around the nucleus. The Golgi apparatus, another kind of squiggly one, but a little bit further away. The mitochondria, which we can see is a bit smaller in both the plant and animal cells. Vacuole, which is again quite small in the animal cell, but significantly bigger in the plant cell. The cell membrane, which is wrapping around the animal and the plant cell. And our last part, which is the cytoplasm, which is kind of like the fluid that fills up both plant and animal cells. Okay, let's take a more detailed look at each one of these, starting with the nucleus. It's that big ball or big sphere sitting in the middle, probably one of the most identifiable organelles. And what's going on in there is it stores DNA. DNA is a little bit complicated, but as a quick summary, it's a kind of chemical code for how to build up an organism. It codes for which proteins to put together. Those are stored in the nucleus. It's like the blueprints for how to build the organism. It'll control the expression of those codes, or which are often called a section of those codes, which is a gene. A gene is an area that's going to code for a specific characteristic. So that information is going to be stored inside the nucleus. It also coordinates DNA replication. So when it's going to make a new cell, it's going to split in cell division. It's going to copy all that DNA, so coordinates that process as well. And for each one of these organelles, I'm going to give you an analogy to something that functions similar to this organelle, so you can kind of remember what it's like based off this analogy of something you already know. So what I'm going to use for the nucleus is kind of like a town office or a town council, or maybe the mayor's office or something like that. And why I choose that one is because that's got the blueprints for maybe how the city's going to be designed. It's where we're going to kind of control what we're going to do and where we're going to go with the cell, kind of controls and operates the cell. Next is the endoplasmic reticulum. So this is kind of wrapped around the nucleus. Actually, there's a bit of a hole there. That's where the nucleus would be, but this image focusing on the endoplasmic reticulum. And this kind of squiggly stuff around it, and some of it you can see is kind of rough with dots, and some of it is more smooth. And there are two parts here. I'm going to focus on the rough part first, and it actually is called the rough endoplasmic reticulum. It's rough because if we zoom in there, we see these little bumps, and those little bumps are ribosomes. Ribosomes are things that are going to build proteins. So they're right next to the nucleus. You get that kind of blueprint. They're going to read that blueprint and start to build proteins. The smooth endoplasmic reticulum is similar, but it's just going to build other things. It's going to build lipids, and it also is in a bit of chemical control with like waste and stuff like that. But I mainly want to think of this as building proteins on the rough and then building lipids for the smooth. So my analogy, kind of like a construction site where we're reading the blueprints or reading the DNA, and then we got the ribosomes that are going to be building those proteins based off of the DNA or blueprints. Next up, we have the Golgi apparatus, another squiggly looking thing. The Golgi apparatus modifies, sorts, and packages proteins and lipids from the ER, which is the endoplasmic reticulum that we just covered. So it takes all that stuff that it built, it's going to package it, sort it, and send it where it needs to go. So it's kind of in control of distribution of what was made in the endoplasmic reticulum. So my analogy is kind of a warehouse here, since there's a bunch of packages. So we're going to sort through and package all the stuff that was built, and then we're going to send it off to where it needs to go. Next up, a pretty popular one, the mitochondrion, which people often say mitochondria. I've even said that as well. Mitochondria is correct. It just means when there's more than one of them. The mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. The mitochondria converts sugars into usable energy for the organism, which is called ATP. So it takes sugar and turns it into a usable type of energy that the cell can use and do things with. So my analogy for this is a power plant, the powerhouse of the cell. It's going to take in sugars and then convert it into usable energy, just like a power plant takes maybe fossil fuels or nuclear energy or even water flowing and converts it into usable electricity, just like the cell turns sugars into usable ATP. Next, onto the vacuole, which is just kind of like a little blob here we have to the side, and its purpose is to store stuff. It could be storing water, nutrients, waste, kind of anything that needs to be stored is going to be stored in a vacuole. This one's a little bit different in plants and animals. There's a very large one in plants, and there's usually smaller ones going on in animals. And so a pretty simple analogy here, just a storage facility, somewhere you can store a variety of different things is like a vacuole. Next up is the cell membrane. The cell membrane looking a little bit complicated there. There's lots going on, and I'll cover this in more detail in a future video. But for right now, we're going to say it's a phospholipid bilayer, which means there's phosphorus and lipids made up in this cell membrane, and there's two layers. So see if I can point out there's phosphorus heads right here, these little lipid tails, and there's one layer here, and then one layer here. There's two layers of them, so a phospholipid bilayer. And what it's meant to do is keep the inside separate from the outside. So this wraps around the outside of the cell, keeps everything going on inside separate than what's going on outside. And that's important, even for like a human being. We need skin, things inside to be separate than what's going on outside. So membrane important, not just for our whole organism, but also for every individual cell. Now, some things do pass in and out of the cell, but there's other things that we have to control. So there's these transport proteins that can control what goes in and out of the cell. So my analogy for this one would be kind of like a security line, maybe at a concert or something like that. You know, which very important people is it letting in, which people is it keeping out, and then also maybe stopping people from taking things out that's not there. So controlling what's going in and out, kind of like a security line. And last up in this category is the cytoplasm. Wasn't really sure what to put for a picture for this one, so I just have this kind of animated blob that's supposed to represent almost kind of like a blob of water, because that's kind of what the cytoplasm is. It just fills up the cell. So imagine if you had a water balloon and it was full of water, the water would be the cytoplasm. It's what's filling up the cell. But it provides a medium to transport things, so things can move around in the cell, and it also provides pressure on the cell so it can keep its shape. So my analogy here, if we consider the ocean, the cytoplasm would be the water. It's what allows things to move within it. I also like the analogy to a water balloon. It provides pressure so it can keep that shape. Okay, so there are the main 7 organelles, and they're present in both animals and plant cells. Definitely good to know those ones. There's also a couple that are unique to plants and unique to animals. Let's take a look at animals first. These ones are only in animal cells. My first one is lysosome. Lysosomes. What are lysosomes? Lysosomes contain digestive enzymes. When I say digestive, you might think about digesting and breaking down food, and that's kind of what they're related to. They break down food, but they also break down waste and dead cells and stuff like that. But I remember it as kind of digestive enzymes to break down food and stuff like that. So that's lysosomes. The reason I kind of remember that is we eat food, animals eat food, and plants, they kind of make their own foods. They don't really need to eat or digest things, so that helps me remember that lysosomes are just in animal cells. We have one more thing unique to animal cells, which is a centriole. Centrioles are these kind of like long, spindle, kind of fibery looking things. And what they do is they assist in cell division. So when all the DNA replicates and we need to split it apart to form 2 cells, the centrioles are going to aid in doing this part, splitting up the cell and the DNA. This does happen in plants as well. They do cell division as well because they can keep growing and making new cells, but they do it by a different method. So centrioles are going to be unique to animal cells. Next, on to plant cells. What's unique in a plant cell? Well, the first one, you may notice there's a thick border around this cell that was not around the animal cell. This is our cell wall. It's important to note that both have a cell membrane, something keeping the inside separate from the outside, but this thicker, more rigid structure is unique to a plant cell, and this can provide more structure and protection. I usually like to think of it because animals have usually bones or an exoskeleton or something like that to give it more structure, but plants don't really have bones. So to keep it more rigid, keep it upright like a plant growing, it needs a little bit more structure and protection. So that's what comes in with the cell wall. Next, a pretty important one for the plant is the chloroplasts. The chloroplasts have chlorophyll, which is like a green pigment. It allows them to absorb sunlight for the process of photosynthesis. So they take sunlight, combine it with CO2 and water, and are able to make sugars or glucose. That's definitely unique to plants. It'd be really nice if animals had that. If we did, we could just, I'm a little bit hungry, go to the sun, absorb some with your chloroplast and be making sugar or making food. That'd be really nice, but unfortunately we don't have those, so plants are unique to have chloroplasts. I will cover photosynthesis a little bit more in detail in a future video, but for right now, just know the chloroplasts have pigment to absorb sunlight. And one more I'm going to give like an honorable mention to is going to be the large central vacuole, because there's a very big vacuole in the plant cell. There's also vacuoles in an animal cell, but they don't have one that's big and massive in the middle of the plant cell like this. So having that big, large one in the middle is unique to plant cells, but there are vacuoles in animal cells. They're just smaller. And that's all we have for today's video. So I hope that helped you to understand those main 7 that are in both plants and animals, and the kind of 2 unique ones in each plant and animal cell. If you found that helpful, I have entire course playlists for high school science over here, and I have the latest video over here. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.